this year's Arab Water Week. This will be achieved through a blue peace, i.e. using water as a vehicle for peace approach and movement. Without further ado, kindly allow me to introduce you briefly to our distinguished panelists. Dr. Danilo Turk is a Slovenian diplomat, professor of international law, human rights expert, and political figure who served as the president of Slovenia from 2007 to 2012. He was the first Slovene ambassador to the United Nations from 1992 to 2000 and was the UN Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs from 2000 to 2005. He is a visiting professor of international law at Columbia University in New York City, a professor emeritus at the Faculty of Law of the University of Ljubljana, and non-resident senior fellow at Renmin University of China in Beijing. He is the founder of Danilo Turk Foundation, devoted mostly to the rehabilitation of child victims of armed conflict. He was also the chairman of the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace between 2015 and 2017. Dr. Hakam Al-Alami holds a PhD in Natural Sciences, Geology, and Environment from the University of Würzburg in Germany. He is currently advisor to His Royal Highness Prince Al-Hassan bin Talal on water and sanitation. He has extensive experience in water resource management and environmental impact assessment. He has previously been an associate professor at Al Bayt University, working with postgrad students on watershed and water quality and management issues. Ambassador Lucas Gasser is ambassador to Switzerland in the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan and the Republic of Iraq since August 2018. Previously, Ambassador Gasser was ambassador of Switzerland to the Republic of Armenia from 2013 to 2018. He also held the position of deputy head of mission at the embassies of Switzerland in Bangkok, Warsaw, Caracas, and between 1996 and 2000, he was the head of the Russia and CIS countries desk at the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs in Bern. Ambassador Gasser holds a degree in Slavonic languages from the University of Freiburg, and he is the father of 3 children. François Muger holds master's degree in mineralogy and geophysics from the University of Lausanne, hydrology from the University of Neuchâtel, and environmental engineering. His experience spans across a range of different private and public institutions in Switzerland, Africa, Latin America, Central Asia, and East Europe. He was notably the chief of Central America Water Program for the Swiss Agency for Cooperation and Development, and a senior water specialist at the World Bank. After heading SDC's Global Water Program for 8 years, François was awarded the title of Swiss Special Envoy for Water and given the responsibility for the creation and development of the Geneva Water Hub. Carol Shushani Sherfan serves as chief of the Water Resources section in the Sustainable Development Policies Division at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia in Beirut. Her work focuses on implementing regional initiatives and efforts to support Arab states in the areas of climate change assessment and adaptation and water-related sustainable development goals. This includes the coordinating the United Nations League of Arab States Regional Initiative for the Assessment of Climate Change Impacts on Water Resources and Socioeconomic Vulnerability in the Arab region, as well as the Arab Integrated Water Resources Management Network. Prior to joining ESCWA, she worked for the Harvard Institute for International Development and the World Bank. She holds degrees from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy in Boston and the Georgetown University of Foreign Service in Washington, D.C., where she focused on development, economics, international law, and international environmental policy. Dr. Danilo, let us start with you.
Thank you very much, Natasha, and salam alaikum to everybody. I'm very happy to be here, and for me this is a very happy occasion because today we are presenting the work of the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace, the report which was translated into Arabic recently, and maybe the cameras can show the text or the publication which is available in this conference center. I understand that my task is really very simple, to explain the basic reasons and the basic features of the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace, which I had the honor to chair. And I would like to say right from start that we owe a great deal of gratitude to Jordan in this context. In 2015, a group of countries, 15 co-convening countries, came together and decided to form a global high-level panel to discuss the question of relationship between water and peace and to strengthen water cooperation as an instrument of peace. Jordan was among the most active members in that group, and His Royal Highness Prince Hassan bin Talal was one of the most active members of the group. We were also lucky to have the support of Jordan in our work. The final and main session of the panel was held in Amman, Jordan, in May 2017, and then 3 months later we published the report, which was then launched in Geneva and New York in September that year. Subsequently, it was translated into several languages, including Arabic. Now, the basic premise upon which this report was constructed was, as I said, the understanding that water scarcity and water-related phenomena represent a huge problem for the future of the world. So the world has to be better aware of the problem and develop water cooperation as a more effective instrument of peace. Today, there are 2 billion people around the world who do not have access to safe drinking water. And if the situation continues, there will be 4 billion people in similar situations in the middle of this century. Now that means that the potential for further conflicts will grow. And we have seen in the past in certain parts of Africa and in the Middle East how water scarcity contributes to the factors that drive armed conflicts. So we have to be aware of dangers, and we have to figure out the methods and techniques that would help solving the water problem and make it an instrument of peace. This was the premise, and upon that the report of the high-level panel was produced, and I would like to just briefly sketch out the main features and recommendations of the report. In addition to this basic and very disturbing assessment, the report suggested a global conference on water issues which would strengthen global cooperation in that regard. The panel was aware that the last conference of this kind was convened 40 years ago in Mar del Plata in Argentina, and that it produced the concept of comprehensive water management. It is important to look at this question again from a global perspective. And the panel was very happy when the General Assembly of the United Nations last year in March declared a global decade of water action, which has started last year and which will continue for the next 10 years. During the first year of that decade, the Sustainable Development Goals process, which you are familiar with, and Sustainable Development Goals do include the right to safe drinking water and sanitation. The first year of that process was marked by a very strong emphasis on water issues. The high-level political forum, which is the main instrument of assessment of development in the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, was devoted to water issues in New York in July last year. So we have helped to launch this understanding of the global importance of water cooperation, and we are going to continue in that spirit. Today, the 5th Arab Water Week represents a very valuable opportunity to add substance and ideas for our future work. Now, of course, the panel was aware that one has to look into water problems also in the situations of armed conflicts. And the panel produced a number of recommendations focusing specifically on the United Nations Security Council and the principal actors of the global security architecture to alleviate the plight of civilians in armed conflict who are often deprived of water. Things have to be done to make sure that this sort of situations do not continue, and that the existing norms of international humanitarian law, which tend to protect civilians, are better respected. This year, we are proposing a set of principles for protection of water infrastructure and water resources in armed conflicts, and we are going to New York in March to discuss this with the members of the Security Council and other interested actors in that location. This is just to give you a glimpse of the continuous work which is looking at water cooperation and water protection as essential, both in times of peace but also in times of armed conflict. Now, talking about the times of peace, the panel strongly emphasized the importance of international law, which does contain an important number of instruments, treaties that exist at the global, regional, and bilateral levels. And those treaties have actually given rise to important principles, such as the principle of fair and equitable distribution of water resources in transboundary water situations, and the obligation of states not to produce excessive harm to water resources as they use water. Now, these legal obligations obviously have their own implementation mechanisms that have to be strengthened, and there is a great deal of scope available for additional transboundary water cooperation systems, some of which should be bilateral, but some of them should be regional. In this context, the panel understood that initiatives such as Blue Peace Middle East are important. They may not immediately produce transboundary water arrangements of a regional character, but they do produce additional space for cooperation, and that should be strengthened. The panel paid attention to questions of measuring water quantity and quality, which is often one of the critical questions in developing transboundary water cooperation, and I'm pleased to learn that in the opening part of our meeting today, we heard a great deal of emphasis on the questions of measuring water quantity and quality and improving water quantity and quality, and obviously these meetings today and tomorrow will help us to go further in that regard. The panel also dealt with the question of involving all sectors of society in developing proper water management. In many cases, this is purely internal affair of states, and therefore it's quite clear that states primarily have the responsibility to develop appropriate mechanisms. But states can also learn. States can also learn from good practices of other states and make sure that all sectors of society, not only governments, not only business, but also scientific communities, civil society, local communities are fully involved in developing water projects or projects of development nature that require the use of water. Finally, the report dealt with the questions of developing new mechanisms in the field of finance and new mechanisms in the field of water diplomacy. In the field of finance, we looked at the evolution of the existing instruments that have been developed in the context of protection of environment, the environmental facilities, and the work of the World Bank, UNDP, and other actors in that regard. And obviously this has to be supported. There are new players in the field, financial actors which were not there at the beginning. That also has to be supported. And there are new instruments such as blue bonds or a blue fund that could be developed in the future that we can discuss in our discussion today and in the coming days. And very finally, water diplomacy. Water is often seen as a matter of a technical nature, best left to technical experts to deal with. But water always has an important political importance, political connotation, and very often the problems of water cooperation can be resolved only with an appropriate involvement of political actors, including in particular political leaders. Here I'm coming back to His Royal Highness Prince Hassan, who showed us the way of how the political leaders can help developing a concept of using water as an instrument of peace. But then we wanted to be more specific. We went into the question of how does one establish an appropriate international network of mechanisms that could observe the development of water cooperation and stimulate those types of cooperation which are most promising and which can bring results most speedily. This is how we came to the idea of the Global Observatory for Water and Peace, and we understood that the panel, which was assisted in its work by Geneva Water Hub, a think tank based in Geneva, could benefit from the same support by developing a network of cooperation among various institutions around the world and using Geneva Water Hub as the core, as the center through which the information is going and where the think tank activity can help developing a global approach. Now, this is how we structured the report of the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace. I propose to end at this point because other speakers in the panel will speak about other aspects, including, very importantly, about the Global Observatory for Water and Peace. But before concluding, I would like to pay special tribute to a country that has helped us a lot in that regard, the country of Switzerland, where the Geneva Water Hub is located. A country which has a great experience both in development assistance, development cooperation, humanitarian law, humanitarian assistance, and in every other aspect. With this word of gratitude, I would like to conclude my